Jack Calloway didn't believe in haunting stories. 20 years of driving the roads of the United States, crossing deserts, passing through forgotten towns, hearing reports from other truckers about strange lights, creatures in the road, and whispers on the CB radio. He always dismissed it all as nonsense, fatigue, imagination, alcohol. But that night on Route 46, he would begin to doubt everything he had always believed. The trip was simple: to transport a load of auto parts from Texas to Nevada. The company required him to make the journey at night to avoid the heavy traffic of the day. Jack didn't mind. He liked the empty road, the silence. The CB radio was on its usual channel, but there was only static. Strange, he thought. Normally, at least one truck driver would be on the frequency chatting away. And before we continue with this intriguing story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps us bring you more content like this. Now let's get back to the story. The night was cold for a desert. The cloudless sky revealed an intense full moon, illuminating the asphalt that stretched endlessly ahead. There were no other cars on the highway. Jack took a sip of cold coffee from his thermos and yawned. It was a few hours until the next stop, an isolated gas station in the middle of the road. But then the CB radio squawked. "Jack?" He frowned and picked up the microphone. "Who's on the line?" More static. And then something that made his stomach turn. "Jack, help me." Her heart raced. The sound was distorted, muffled, but he recognized that voice. It was Danny's voice, his brother. Jack froze. It didn't make sense. Danny had disappeared 10 years ago on that same road. The case was never solved. The police never found a body, never knew what happened. He just disappeared. Jack squeezed the microphone hard. "Danny? Is this a joke?" The only response was static. He switched off the CB, trying to ignore the shiver running up his spine. "I'm tired. I'm hearing things." He turned up the music to distract his mind and accelerated. But then something moved on the roadside. Jack couldn't see it properly, just a pale blur passing along the edge of the road. He blinked a few times, trying to focus. Nothing. "I need to stop this caffeine." 20 minutes later, he saw a car stopped in the middle of the road. The headlights were off, the doors wide open. Jack slowed down and reached for the flashlight he always carried. Something was very wrong. He got out of the truck. The air seemed heavier. The silence was absolute, except for the faint wind that blew the sand across the asphalt. He approached the car. The interior was empty, but the engine was still warm. That's when he saw it. Footprints in the dust beside the car. They started next to the driver's door, but they were inhuman. 3 long, deep, claw-like marks dug into the ground. And the footprints didn't go anywhere. They just started and disappeared a few meters later. Jack took a step back, feeling his chest tighten. And then the CB radio in the truck turned itself on. "Jack, please, help me." It was Danny again. He spun on his heels and ran back to the truck. He locked the doors, started the engine, and hit the gas. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't normal. This wasn't human. As he drove, his rearview mirror reflected something coming up behind the truck, something pale and too fast to be a man. Jack didn't look twice. He just accelerated, unaware that this was just the first of many things he would see on that road. Jack Calloway gripped the steering wheel tightly, keeping his eyes fixed on the asphalt ahead. But he knew. He could feel it. It was still back there. The engine rumbled loudly as he accelerated, but no matter how hard he pushed the truck, the reflection in the rearview mirror remained the same. The thing was running behind him, keeping up with his speed effortlessly. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to see what was following him on that deserted road. But then he heard his name again. Jack. This time it wasn't on the CB radio. It was next to him outside the window. His heart almost stopped. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he forced himself not to turn his head. "This isn't real. I'm tired. I'm imagining things." But then he heard it again. "Jack, help me." It was Danny. It was enough to break his resistance. He turned his face, his eyes wide, and saw a human face pressed against the glass of the passenger window. It shouldn't have been possible. He was driving at 100 km/h in the middle of the desert, and something was there outside, following his truck as if it were just another passenger. But it wasn't a man. The skin was too pale, too thin, almost translucent in the moonlight. His mouth was slightly open, as if he were whispering something Jack couldn't hear. But the worst thing was the eyes. They were empty, completely white. Jack screamed and pulled hard on the steering wheel. The truck shook, skidding on the asphalt. He lost control for a few seconds and almost overturned. But when he steadied the steering and looked again, the thing was no longer there. He was breathing fast, in a cold sweat. His mind was spinning. What the hell was that? The CB radio squawked again. Nevada's last stop, 20 kilometers ahead. The voice was different this time. Thick, tired, like an older man's. A truck driver? An employee of the gas station? Jack didn't hesitate. He hit the gas, ignoring the tension in his chest and his growing fear. He needed to get off that road. Nevada's last stop gas station was the only civilization within a 200-kilometer radius. An old, weathered building with a convenience store and 2 fuel pumps that looked like they were straight out of the 60s. Jack parked the truck next to the store, got out, and looked around. The silence was suffocating. The gas station's fluorescent lights blinked on and off. No other cars. No sound apart from the faint wind sweeping across the desert sand. The store door creaked as he entered. Behind the counter, an old man with sunburnt skin was leaning on the counter, staring at him with a look too tired to be surprised. "You saw it, didn't you?" Jack froze. "What?" The old man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up a bottle of whiskey, filled a glass and pushed it towards him. "Drink up. You'll need it." Jack hesitated, but his hands were shaking. He took the glass and turned the burning liquid down his throat. The old man continued. "It followed you on the road, didn't it? You heard it call your name." Jack swallowed. "How did you know?" The attendant let out a deep sigh. "Because it's happened before, many times." He reached into a rusty drawer and pulled out a bundle of old, yellowed photos. Jack took a few and began to look. They were photos of missing people. There were at least a dozen of them, all with happy expressions, before they disappeared without explanation. And then his blood ran cold. In the last photo, he saw a face he recognized perfectly. Danny, his brother. The photo was old, but it was there, among the other missing people. "That doesn't make sense," Jack muttered. "How do you have this photo?" The old man took a match and lit a cigarette. "Because I tried to warn them before they disappeared too. But nobody ever listens to me." Jack felt a growing anger. "What's that thing on the road? What happened to my brother?" The old man looked at him thoughtfully. "I don't know what that thing is, but I can tell you what it does." Jack leaned in, tense. "It feeds on names." Silence stretched across the store, heavy as a storm cloud. "What do you mean?" The old man took a drag on his cigarette and blew the smoke out slowly. "It doesn't take just anyone. Only those who hear their name coming from the darkness. When you hear it, it's gone. No matter where you run, it finds you, and when it finds you, you disappear." Jack felt a deep shiver run down his spine. "So how come I'm still here?" The old man let out a humorless half smile. "Because she's still playing with you." Jack remained silent. This couldn't be happening. It was like something out of a cheap horror movie. But what if it were true? He looked at Danny's photo again. 10 years. 10 years without answers. 10 years of nightmares. And now, something on that road was calling his name. Doubt turned to anger. "How do I kill this thing?" The old man laughed low. "Kid, you don't kill something like that." Jack slammed his glass on the counter. "I'll put an end to it. I'm going to bring my brother back." The old man sighed. "Then you need to get back on the road." Jack hesitated. "What do you mean?" The old man took an old CB radio from under the counter and put it in front of him. "This radio doesn't pick up anything anymore. It's dead. But from time to time, it transmits the voices of those who have disappeared." Jack felt his stomach lurch. "If your brother is still out there, if there's any chance of finding him, he'll call you again." Jack clenched his hands into fists. He knew what he needed to do. He needed to get back on the road. And this time, he wouldn't run away. Jack grabbed the CB radio and headed back to Route 46, determined to face the creature and find out the truth. The truck's engine rumbled loudly as Jack accelerated back onto Route 46. The CB radio was on the right channel, but there was no sound, no static, no voice. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his heart hammering in his chest. What the hell am I doing? Everything inside him screamed that getting back on that road was a bad idea. But then he looked at Danny's picture on the dashboard, and anger took over. If that thing had toyed with him before, now the roles had been reversed. Call me again, bastard. Let's see who disappears first. The moon shone brightly, illuminating the endless asphalt ahead. The desert seemed empty, as if everything around it had been dead for centuries. No houses, no cars, no life, until he saw it. Headlights in the rearview mirror. Jack frowned. Another truck? He kept his eyes on the mirror, trying to identify the vehicle. The headlights were low, but strangely they shone brighter than usual, as if they weren't just lights, but something alive. Then the headlights split into 3, and then into 4, and then into 5. Jack held his breath. They weren't headlights, they were eyes. He pressed the accelerator. The lights came closer, and then the CB radio squawked. "Jack, help me." Jack felt his stomach turn. It was Danny again. "Danny? Where are you?" Static. "Jack, I'm down." The radio cut out, but the last few words were enough to make Jack lose his breath. Underneath, the truck shook. The speedometer read 120 km/h. But even so, the things behind him weren't reducing the distance. Jack couldn't just keep driving. He had to stop. He needed to understand. And then he saw a dirt track leading off the highway, a small, discreet entrance, almost hidden in the middle of the desert. He didn't know why, but something in his chest told him he had to go in there. With one swift movement, he turned the wheel and threw the truck onto the dirt road. The lights behind him stopped abruptly, as if they couldn't go any further. Jack drove for a few more minutes until he saw a dark structure in the middle of nowhere. It was a wooden hut, fallen to pieces, covered in dust and time. No lights, no movement. Jack got out of the truck. The wind whistled around him, kicking up small clouds of sand. He felt a strange chill run down his spine as he walked up to the cabin door and pushed it open. The smell hit him first. Rotten, damp, blood. Jack covered his nose and looked around. The place looked like it had been abandoned for decades. An old wooden table, broken chairs, a mattress lying in the corner, and on the floor, footprints. They weren't normal. They were the same footprints he had seen on the abandoned car on the road. 3 long, deep marks, like claws. And then he saw it. An iron hatch in the floor. It was closed with an old, rusty lock. Beside it, a broken chain. Someone had been here before. Someone had tried to get in, or to get out. The CB radio squawked again. "Jack, open up." Jack held his breath. He had to know. With a strong tug, he broke the lock. The hatch opened with a deep creak, revealing a black hole descending into darkness. He took out his flashlight and shone it down the rusty metal ladder. Whatever was down there was waiting for him, and he was going to find out. Jack Calloway took a deep breath and pointed the flashlight into the hatch. The beam of light illuminated just a few steps before being swallowed up by the darkness. The smell coming from inside was even worse than that of the cabin. Damp, rust, and something rotten that had been there for a long time. He held his breath, put his foot on the first step, and began to descend. Each step made the old metal creak, as if it would give way at any moment. The cold grew as he descended. It felt strange, like he was leaving the normal world behind. When his feet touched the dirt floor, he turned the flashlight around, and what he saw didn't make sense. The underground space was much bigger than the hut above him. It was a bunker. The concrete walls were full of scuff marks, some looking like they had been made by human hands, others not. Jack swallowed and moved on. There were locked metal doors along the narrow corridor. Some were just ajar, revealing empty rooms with old, stained mattresses and fossilized food scraps. But then he heard it. "Jack!" The whisper echoed down the corridor. The CB radio hanging from his belt squawked, but there was no voice. He lifted the flashlight. On the wall to his left, something was handwritten in jagged letters, forcefully scratched into the concrete surface. He approached and read it. "If you hear your name, do not answer." Jack felt his stomach turn. That wasn't a warning. It was a sentence. Further on, one of the doors was wide open, and inside there was something different from the other rooms. A table, an old tape recorder. Papers scattered around. Jack approached and picked up the first sheet. It was a report, dated 1958. "Echo Project, confidential file, sensory isolation test. Subjects, 12 results, 4 withdrawals, 7 adverse effects, 1 disappearance." Jack turned the page. The handwriting was shaky, as if whoever had written it was desperate. "He's learned our names. He calls us even when we don't speak. We mustn't answer. Never answer." The next sheet was torn, but the last note was clear enough to make Jack's breath catch. "The last subject disappeared inside room 6. We're not opening anymore. We're locking up. May God forgive us." He looked around. The bunker wasn't just a shelter. It was an experiment. And what was on the road was created here. Jack walked down the corridor until he found the door numbered with a large 6 painted in faded red. It was locked from the inside, but he heard something behind it. Slow, weak breathing, human. Jack put his ear to the door. "Danny?" he whispered. Silence, and then a scratchy, dry sound came from the other side. "Jack, it's me!" Jack closed his eyes, his fists clenched. It was his brother's voice, but then the CB radio squawked, and another voice spoke. "It's not him!" Jack took a step back. The same voice, duplicated. What the hell was going on? He looked at the lock. If the thing behind the door was Danny, he needed to open it. But if it wasn't, doubt weighed like a stone on his chest. He gripped the handle and turned. The door opened slowly. The torchlight flickered in the air, illuminating something crouched at the back of the room. And when it turned towards him, Jack knew he had made a mistake. The flashlight beam flickered in Jack's hand as he stared at the thing at the back of room 6. The figure was crouched, huddled against the wall, its skinny arms wrapped around its knees. Its hair was dirty and disheveled, and its skin too pale to be human. But what made Jack hold his breath was none of that. It was the face. It was Danny, or at least it looked like Danny. The brother he hadn't seen for 10 years was standing there, staring at him with wide, completely empty eyes. Jack swallowed dryly and took a hesitant step into the room. "Danny, it's me, Jack." The thing blinked slowly. Then it tilted its head the wrong way, a dry movement, as if something was dislocated in its neck. His brother's mouth opened, and Jack heard his own voice come out. "Danny, it's me, Jack." Jack froze. The thing had repeated exactly what he had said in the same tone, in the same cadence. His stomach churned. No, that's not possible. He stepped back, but the being imitated him, moving in an artificial way, as if copying his movements. Then, suddenly, Danny smiled, and another voice came over the CB radio. "Jack, don't look at him!" Jack turned to the radio instinctively. Just then, the thing threw itself at him. The impact threw Jack against the wall. The thing had power, a lot of strength. He tried to push it off, but the being's arms were cold and icy like dead flesh. Danny's face was too close, and his mouth began to open wider than it should have been able to. "Jack, help me!" The voice was wrong now. It was too much. Several voices together, as if all the people the thing had ever imitated were speaking at the same time. Jack struggled with all his might. He shoved the flashlight in the creature's face and pressed the button. The bright light made the thing recoil violently, letting out a dry, fragmented scream. Jack wasted no time. He pulled out the hunting knife he always carried on his belt and drove it hard into the creature's throat. The being shook, convulsing. Then it let out a distorted sound, a laugh. Jack felt a deep chill. The knife wasn't working, the thing wasn't bleeding. Jack staggered backwards, feeling the despair grow. How do you kill something that can't die? Then he remembered what the old man at the gas station had said. It feeds on names. And he did the only thing he could think of. You're not Danny. The being stopped moving. Jack continued. You are nobody. The being began to shake violently, as if it were tearing itself apart inside. Its empty eyes stared at him. The smile faded. Jack, help me. The voice was now weak, distorted. You don't exist. The creature let out a guttural scream and fell to the ground. Its body began to twist, as if something inside it was falling apart. Jack didn't wait to see what would happen. He ran out of the room and locked the door. The scream echoed throughout the bunker, and then silence. Jack was breathing heavily, leaning against the corridor wall. But then the CB radio turned itself on. And this time, the voice that came out of it was different. Jack? He swallowed. It was Danny. This time, the voice was real. Jack looked back at the dark bunker. The warning on the wall came back to him. If you hear your name, do not answer. But what if it really was Danny now? His chest tightened. What if he was leaving his brother behind? The radio squawked again. Jack, please, don't leave me here. The words sounded so human. Jack closed his eyes, and then he made his decision. Jack Calloway climbed the hatch ladder like a man fleeing hell. His body trembled, his lungs burned, and every cell inside him screamed that he should never have entered that bunker. The CB radio squeaked on his belt. Jack, did you hear me? He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to shake off the guilt burning in his mind. If that really was Danny, then he'd left him for dead. If it wasn't, then he had almost fallen into the trap. When he finally emerged from the hatch and returned to the cabin, Jack closed the iron lid tightly and locked it again. The silence of the night seemed heavy around him. No sound, no wind, as if the desert was holding its breath. He ran to the truck, started the engine and stepped on the accelerator. He didn't look back. Jack drove for hours, not knowing exactly where he was going. He just wanted to get away from that damned road. The CB radio remained on, but silent, until Jack. His heart stopped for a second. His hand clenched the steering wheel. Jack, it's me. It was Danny. But something was wrong. The voice was too low, weak, as if it was being whispered in the background. Jack swallowed. Danny, static, and then, Jack, behind you. Jack felt an icy shiver run up his spine. The rear-view mirror reflected something in the passenger seat. He wasn't alone in the truck. Jack felt his chest tighten. He didn't want to look, but he had to. He turned his face slowly, and he saw. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat. A thin man, too pale. His hair was dirty, disheveled. His face, it was Danny, or at least he looked like it. But his eyes were empty. Danny's mouth opened, and the voice that came out wasn't his. Jack, please help me. Jack felt a wave of paralyzing dread. He had brought it with him, or it was never trapped down there in the first place. Whatever it was toying with him. The truck began to shake. The dashboard lights flashed. The CB radio began to squawk frantically, dozens of voices overlapping, all calling his name. Jack looked at the passenger seat and made a decision. With one swift movement, he pulled hard on the steering wheel. The truck veered off the road, skidding on the gravel, heading straight into the ravine of a gorge. The radio screamed. The truck crashed. The world became a blur of metal, glass, and blood. Then darkness. Jack opened his eyes hours later, still strapped into the seat, his head bleeding. The truck was wrecked, and the passenger seat was empty. He struggled out of the wreckage and looked around. The sun was already rising over the horizon, dyeing the desert orange and red. He had survived. But what about Danny? Jack looked at the CB radio, now muted. No squawk, no voice. He didn't know if he had won. if he'd gotten rid of it, or if it was just waiting for another chance. But he did know one thing. He would never go back to Route 46 5 years later. The CB radio hummed softly in the cab of Ethan Miller's truck, a young truck driver on his first solo route through the Nevada desert. The early morning silence was absolute, broken only by the roar of the engine and the whistle of the hot wind against the windshield. He adjusted his cap on his head, took a sip of coffee and picked up the radio microphone. "This is Miller, anyone?" "Nothing." He sighed. Deserted roads were too lonely. The sign for Route 46 flashed by on the side of the truck, covered in dust and almost illegible. He frowned. He had heard of this road. Some older truckers talked about it, always with a strange tone, as if they were avoiding the subject, but Ethan didn't believe in such nonsense. Ghost, creature, trucker legends. Then the radio squawked. He looked at the device, frowning, and a husky male voice came out of the speaker. "Miller, help me." His heart froze. He didn't recognize the voice. "Who is this?" Static. "So, I'm Jack Calloway. I need help. On Route 46. Ethan felt a shiver run up his spine. He'd heard that name before. Jack Calloway, the truck driver who disappeared 5 years ago after an accident on that same road. The police never found his body, just the wreckage of the truck and a CB radio that was still squawking. And now, Jack's voice was calling him. Ethan held his breath. The radio squawked again. "Miller, help me." He looked in the rearview mirror. He saw something running on the roadside, keeping up with his truck. His eyes widened in terror. And then he heard his own name. Ethan. Ethan Miller felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He didn't answer. The voice on the CB radio squeaked again, insistent. "Ethan, help me." He gripped the steering wheel tightly. Accelerate or stop? The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, an endless desert of sand and darkness. In the rearview mirror, the shadow ran alongside the truck, following its speed. His heart was pounding. He tried to ignore the voice, tried to convince himself that it was interference, a prank. But then the radio squawked one last time, and this time, the voice was his own. "Ethan, help me." The truck shuddered. The radio switched itself off, and in the passenger seat, the seat was sunk, as if someone invisible was sitting there. Ethan was no longer alone on the road. The cycle was beginning again. What did you think of this outcome? Leave your opinion in the comments. We'd love to know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like to support our work. See you in the next video.